Hello and welcome to Masters of Product Marketing, brought to you by PMA and Product Marketing World. My name is Irshad Raihan. I run product marketing for the Cloud Storage and Data Services business unit at Red Hat, and today we'll be talking about understanding segmentation and customer advocacy in the digital age. Before we jump into it, I'd love to get your opinion on a simple question. What is the role of the product marketer? How do you see the role as it stands today, as it continues to evolve, as it partners with other aspects of marketing, perhaps other aspects of product development, product management, sales, with engineering even? Um, you can enter your responses. We'll give you a minute here. And the reason that I'm asking that question is as we go through the rest of our discussion here today, I'd like to set up a little bit of a framework, right? Broadly speaking, we find the role of product marketers sort of fall into four different categories. Obviously, creativity is sort of the bedrock of a lot of what we do. However, we need to apply a sort of a critical thinking, to all of that in terms of, evaluating how well certain tactics are working versus others, and also in terms of ROI. Curiosity. Some of you engineers in the audience might recognize that that picture that we're using for Curious is really the agile development model, right? So it's small iterations. It's failing fast. It's doing things like A/B testing. A lot of what we do in the marketing world has actually come from this sort of agile methodology, and you'll actually see that represented in much of the marketing tech, MarTech stack as well. And finally, champion, right? None of this matters if we're not able to execute, right? So this is all the go-to-market pieces and making sure that our ideas come alive. What you'll see in the rest of today's deck is each of these icons are going to feature in certain slides, and that's just a way to sort of bring you back to this framework here, right? And sort of hint at what aspects of the product marketing brain we're going to be applying on that particular topic. So, what are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to obviously talk about segmentation, as the title suggests, but we are going to pull in ideas around personas, around storytelling, a little bit around marketing technology, as well as how all of this ties into the customer journey. And of course, we're going to have a lot of fun along the way. What's more fun than a surfing dog in a luau garland, right? I think what's also interesting is what aren't we going to talk about, right? Just making sure that we level set right up front. We are going to be focused on B2B. Therefore, we're really not going to get into B2C. We think B2C is a fascinating space, but it's just not enough time to be able to cover everything today. We're also going to be focused today about lifetime value of customer, right? So we're not going to be focused on transactional marketing, sort of point of sale, one-time marketing. We are not going to cover privacy implications, although that's a super important topic given GDPR and other privacy regulations. And finally, any MarTech mentions I might bring up here are in no way an endorsement or recommendation. All right, so always a good place to start with why. So why customer segmentation? And again, some of this comes naturally to us, right? But it's important to sort of step back and think about why we do certain things. And at the end of the day, it's really driving consistency, right? Can we take our entire customer base and figure out a way to be able to treat them in a way that we can tell them stories and we can appeal to them in different ways. But we can do that consistently within one segment, right? And why is that important? It's important because anything we do, we should, as product marketers, think about scale, right? Being able to apply demand gen scale then becomes so much simpler once you have been able to identify those segments, within your market. And finally, negative targeting, right? This is something where, many times the field tells us that, knowing whom not to target is almost as important as whom to target. So they were able to be much more efficient in their conversations. But these three are important, but from a tactical perspective, we've also seen ABM, account-based marketing, as really kind of be the darling of the product marketing world and the marketing world, more generally. And customer segmentation is a great way for us to think about how we want to be able to target those ABM accounts. All right, so very quickly, let's level set here. Most of us have probably seen some sort of this picture on the left where you've got, market segments. Typically this is based off of, company size or revenue, things like that. The right-hand side is a little bit more of a customer segmentation, much more personal view of the world, right? So this is where you sort of start to think about things like personas, right? And obviously, I think this is something we run into on a fairly regular basis. Is we actually might have situations where the same persona might actually have very different needs across market segments, right? Simply because the pain points can vary quite a bit. So there is sometimes a mixing and matching of persona and customer segments and market segments, and that's perfectly fine. So let's take a look at a couple of questions here, right? What I'm going to show you in the next slide here is a few different methods that we could use for customer segmentation. I'd love your input on which one of these is most used by your company, and if the method that you use isn't listed here, we'd love to know that too, right? So let's go down the list very quickly. You have 5 options. The first one is firmographics, right? So do you segment your customers by their company size, by which vertical they're in, by the annual revenue, things like that, publicly available information effectively? Or do you segment your customers based off of their role or title or seniority, how they evaluate your product, right? Or do you use a needs-based segmentation model? In other words, do you segment your customers by those that have the same pain points? You're treating them as one particular segment for the sake of consistency, or they have certain expectations, or they have a certain level of buyer sophistication, and then you're going to use that to really treat those customers as being part of one segment. Or option D, do you use value-based segmentation? So do you think about your customers in terms of the value to you, right? In other words, lifetime value of the customer, or how much budget they have, discretionary control over, how deep are their pockets effectively, and do you then segment your customers based off of that? And finally, decision-based segmentation. So how much influence does that particular segment have over the buying process end to end, or is it a centralized or decentralized decision-making model, right? So there's, again, no wrong answers, and in all likelihood we use some form of all of these, but I think the question here that we'd love to get into is which one is the most used by your company, right? So if we have data for this question, now it would be really interesting to sort of contrast this with, well, that's what is most used, that's what's most prevalent, but which one's the most accurate, right? And accuracy can mean different things, right? What we're trying to go for here is which one truly represents the state of the market, right? Which one truly represents and has a little bit of give for where the market's headed in the future, and also sets up your field and field marketing, sales, as well as corporate marketing, to be able to execute on our marketing tactics with the most efficiency and accuracy, right? So that's kind of our definition of accuracy. So it'll be interesting to compare the one that is most accurate in our eyes versus the one that is the most used. What we have had a lot of success with, and what our recommendation really is between these, really being able to focus on needs-based customer segmentation is probably the most accurate, and yet it is not the most often used, right? So hopefully that's a key takeaway for you from this session. And let's talk about why, right? The first one is, it checks off all the boxes. When we talked about why customer segmentation, needs-based customer segmentation really helps develop that consistency. It helps us with scale. It helps us with knowing whom not to target, as well as ABM programs. And we've seen this time and time again work really well for us. Secondly, it ties landscape changes to customer needs. And again, the competitive landscape, the landscape of your customers, especially in the B2B technology space, is just rapidly changing, right? And so being able to understand the needs of your customers is going to be key as you develop these segments. Need-based customer segmentation also helps to identify trigger events through purchase and renewal, right? So this is extremely important, is as you're able to think about what really prompts your users and your personas to really go through that entire customer journey. You find that needs-based customer segmentation really does a great job of being able to accurately represent those groups as they through their behaviors. And finally, customer references with similar needs resonate strongly. So as you're thinking about appealing to other or net new customer acquisition, being able to apply references from customers who have really dealt with the same pain points is your strongest storytelling tool. And finally, predicting customer needs, right? So in as much as we're going to advocate in this session understanding your customers, it's important to be able to look ahead around the corner for your customers in many cases, and being able to predict what their needs might be in the future. And finally, we're going to talk a lot about telemetry data as well, right? So in many cases, you can trust what customers do if you have access to digital signatures and, like I said, telemetry data, which a lot of SaaS products do. So we do have that available to us as marketers. However, I find a lot of product marketers either ignore or don't value the telemetry data as much as they could. In many cases, the telemetry data could be telling you things about customer needs far more accurately than almost any anecdotal data. And so, the point we're trying to make here is, at the end of the day, it's customer needs that will drive their buying behavior, and eventually customer needs also drive market behavior, right? So if your customer segmentation is built around customer needs, you're now getting the most accurate picture of why your customers love you, why they evaluate you, when you win, why you win, when you lose, why you lose, things like that. So you're getting a much more accurate picture than perhaps any other way of slicing up the market. Okay, so get into, we've talked a little bit about segments and personas. What do good personas actually look like, right? To me, there's three aspects of it. The first is good personas should help you achieve business goals, right? At the end of the day, marketing is a servant for the overarching business. If you're able to align your use cases for your product to your personas, that's a great place to be. In many cases, we actually do these things sort of backwards, right? We come up with our use cases that are inside out, because we start with the product and then we try to force fit them onto customer needs. Instead, they could be a meet in the middle approach or an outside in approach that's much more valuable, much more effective. Helping product managers and engineers understand the users better, right? This is key as well. I think most of us will agree that product managers, I think, do understand some aspects of customer behavior, as do engineers. However, it behooves us as product marketers to be that glue in being able to translate customer needs better and the use cases better to the product development teams. And finally, depict current state and leave room for evolution, as we said before. All right. Second aspect of what good personas look like is, do they help improve customer experience at the end of the day, right? We're not talking about user experience, right? Just people think of GUIs and things like that, but overarching customer experience, right? Are the personas aligned to sales and field marketing perspective, right? This is key as well, is how often have we, in the corporate headquarters, sat down, come up with a certain set of personas, and only to find that the field, when they actually go and have conversations, don't even use them, right? We build playbooks and use cases and things like that, and field marketing even doesn't use them for execution of marketing tactics in the various geographies. So, getting that buy-in from both the field as well as field marketing is key. In many cases, they could actually have really, really interesting and localized data that needs to be worked into your persona building process. And finally, personas need to also think about crossover job functions, right? So think about DevOps as an area that's developed over the last 10, 15 years as sort of more agile methodologies have creeped into the IT landscape. And if your segmentation model, your persona model can cater to these sort of crossover job functions, that's going to be really key. And finally, negative targeting. We've talked about this before, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. All right. Now, here's the interesting thing: is the way that I lined up these three. We started with business goals, then we talked about customer experience, and now we're talking about optimizing marketing spend. Unfortunately, in my experience, many product marketers think of this in the reverse order. In other words, what they're trying to solve for first is optimizing marketing spend before they think about how their marketing tactics and their segmentation model can help improve customer experience and business goals. So that would be a sort of a second takeaway from the session, hopefully, is let's always think about business goals and experience first, and then about optimizing marketing spend, because there's ways to optimize marketing spend without doing the other two. Clearly understanding the spheres of influence, right, of your segments, offering room for geographic customization, as we said before, with field marketing teams, and finally build in route to market recommendations. This is something we'll revisit when we wrap up the presentation. So as a general rule of thumb, I'd say 2 to 4 distinct needs-based personas is your sweet spot. If you've got just one persona, that's fine. I mean, a lot of SaaS companies, typically startups, etc., they're very specialized, very niche, and they offer point solutions. And you really have one persona. Good for you, right? But typically, that's not typical, right? 5 might be too much, right? If you're bordering in that, anything more than 5, you really got to think about, perhaps there's something where you could, think about needs in a somewhat of a broader fashion and bring it at least down to 5. Even 5, I would say, is an outlier, but anything more than 5 is just too many personas. It's going to be very confusing for your field as well as your field marketing teams to go execute. All right. The other topic you might have noticed in the title of this presentation was customer advocacy. This is an idea that is gaining a lot of momentum, and it's really the idea that as product marketers, one of our functions is to really be the customer whisperer, to understand customers at a very deep level, and that kind of gives us all kinds of insights into how customers behave and how we can take some of those insights and influence product development. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about shadow personas, right? So these personas that are emerging as really key influencers into the buyer's journey. However, in many cases, they're not listed on an official slide when we talk about personas, right? Communities is a great example of that. Red Hat is an open source company, so communities for us are just our bread and butter, right? That's how a lot of our product adoption starts, is with the communities, right? And then they move on to the enterprise, the enterprise version of our products. But even outside of the open source model, communities are extremely important. Remember, communities are full of people that are really giving up their personal time to be able to engage with others and help others out, learn from others, etc. So being able to influence communities through advocacy programs is extremely key for product marketers. You can actually learn a lot about the usage of your products, and in some cases you could even look ahead. Again, the open source model, our roadmaps are written for us by the communities, right? Because they're driven by what practitioners need, what kind of problems our technologies can help solve. But even outside of open source, communities are going to be key in being able to give you insights into roadmaps. The other one that comes up a lot is freemium users, right? So, for a lot of SaaS companies, you may perhaps have a free model and you're looking to upgrade those users into into paid users. Now, freemium is a highly debated, highly contentious topic. We could probably do a session just on the freemium model. So I'm not going to get into that, but what I will say is, again, it's something to consider. It's a shadow persona, and there's different ways to be able to help freemium users. There's many books and lots of MarTech tools that can actually help you do that. But just treating them as shadow personas and understanding that they have a lot of value in terms of telemetry, right? So freemium users they are actually giving you a lot of insights into how they're actually using the products. That could be probably in some cases more valuable than actual revenue, right? If if they're under a certain threshold, so it might actually be helpful to have a fair number of premium users. Inverted users, right? So these are users, let's say developers as one example. These are users that in some way sort of invert the sales funnel, right? So think about, as I said, developers. In the past, you might have had a sort of a customer journey set up to start at a sort of higher level thought leadership piece, move into a webinar, and then you've got a product demo, POC, things like that, right? Developers, on the other hand, skip some of those steps and they want to go right to the product. They want to be able to play with it, and they want to be able to experience your product very quickly. And switching costs are extremely low, right? So they were able to evaluate very quickly, and even if they have spent a significant amount of time on a particular platform, they're less risk averse about moving to other platforms. So that's kind of what I mean by inverted users, and think about how these new users can impact your personas in your segmentation models. Influencers, right? So clearly in the B2C space, we've seen the value of the Snapchat or Instagram, celebrities, one recommendation from them could mean a difference of millions of dollars for brands, right? In the B2B space, we don't quite have that rock star status. However, you do have influencers that are, key industry analysts, third parties that could be running, benchmark tests, things like that. That could be key influencers that are, collating these kinds of lists that will make recommendations to your customers about, the best solution to use for this particular pain point. And finally, targeted ABM. So customer advocacy could be an extremely, valuable tool as you're starting to think about which of your, let's say 10% of your customers that you're actually going to filter through ABM programs. All right, let's switch gears a little bit, right? So we talked, we kind of talked about personas and what good personas look like, and how do you go and sort of take some of this what you might have learned today and really start to apply it in your day-to-day jobs, right? So there's a couple of areas we're going to get into. One appeals to your right brain, one appeals to your left brain. This one obviously much more of a right brain idea, but I truly believe it's a lost art, right? I mean, think about how powerful stories are, right? Each of us resonates to stories. They take us back to a time when a parent or grandparent or an older sibling might have sat down with you and read a story to you. And think about, in many cases, we knew how the story was going to end. We still wanted that experience, right? So people love being told stories too, and our customers love being told stories too, if they're compelling and they really connect and they resonate with them, right? So there's a few thoughts here around how we might be able to use storytelling as a tool to be able to connect with our customers. One of the general rules of thumb is, one persona gets one story, right? So don't try and overthink or overcomplicate it. You could use the same story for multiple personas, and that's actually a good thing, right? But at the same time, one persona gets one story only. We love to use this idea of ethos, pathos, and logos, right? So this framework, it's a Greek framework basically that as you're telling your story, you certainly want to be able to set up why you should listen to me, why is this important, right? But also you want to appeal to the sort of the heart as well as the mind as you're telling that story, right? Too often we jump right into product specs, right? We're just so interested in having the data sheet wars with our competitors that we forget that the ethos and the pathos aspects are equally, if not more important, when we tell stories. Building conflict, right? So use the before and after bridge. Right? So set up your problem statement again. Since if you plan to use needs-based segmentation, that's the reason that all of your constituents within that particular segment will react in a similar fashion, hopefully, to this sort of before-after bridge, because their needs and therefore their pain points are mostly consistent. Um, this one I can't emphasize enough. Start with the why, just as we did today, right? Start with the why, then the how, and finally the what, right? The how tells them how you're going to get there, right? As you've set up the before and after bridge. The what is what's going to get you there, right? Again, as product marketers, we're so interested in delivering the what, right? This product, right? With these features. If we forget sometimes that the why and the how really set up the what, right? If you set up the foundation well with the why and how, the what is going to be so much easier. Speak to personal and professional pain points, right? So what I mean by that is find ways to connect your story or relate your story. In the B2B space, find ways to connect your story to something that's happening in people's B2C space, right? I often use the example of Netflix as an example of how the cloud has really changed the landscape, right? It's something that people connect with right away, but also professional pain points, right? In many cases, the folks that we're talking to, the personas, are looking to, obviously, improve their own careers and think about their career trajectory. So maybe appealing to something that helps them become better professionals, more productive, more successful, could be almost as valuable as something that is intrinsically built into your product as well. Which brings us to, remember purpose, not product, right? It's all about how does what you're telling them enrich their lives? How does it help them solve something that couldn't happen before you spoke to them, right? And the product is just an enabler to be able to get them there. But being able to connect with that purpose is going to be extremely powerful. Using analogies from personal experience, we talked about this, a couple of points earlier as well. Visualization. This is extremely important, right? Being able to actually put your audience into that after picture, right, while you're describing it, that's your nirvana that your product can bring them to, right, as well as visualization, visualizing the pain that perhaps other constituents are experiencing, right, right there and then during your story, I think is something that we've found to be extremely valuable. Always asking what's the big deal, right? This is where the critical aspect of product marketing comes in, is second guessing yourself, and as you're building up the story, always keeping yourself true to, is there enough? So what's in it for me, from a customer's point of view, right? Is there enough oomph in terms of the before and after? And if there isn't, then it's time to go back and rewrite some parts of the story. And finally, plan a surprise. Why not? Why not, right? Who doesn't love a good surprise? And something, hold off on something right to the end of your story always, to be able to give that, a little bit more to your audience. Finally, I think the key takeaway here is stories improve retention. That's why we tell stories, and that's why, as what we find in many cases is, as we go through the decision chain, through the customer journey, there's erosion, right? And so stories help retain a lot of the why as we go through that decision chain. So that's the sort of the right side of the brain, right? Any product marketing discussion isn't quite complete without a MarTech discussion, it seems like these days, right? We're already up to what, about 7,000-ish on the MarTech landscape. It's already gone, pretty crazy here. But there's a few things that I think could be helpful from a segmentation and persona perspective. So let's take a look at that. As you're thinking about segmentation, certainly assign points to behavioral data as well as engagement data. What do I mean by that? So behavioral data is how your customers actually use your product, right? Telemetry was one example, but there's other ways to be able to get that data, just hard data that talks about how your products are being used, and match that with engagement data, right? Obviously cookies have been around for many, many years, tracking pixels. So the idea that a single pixel, embedded inside an email or SMS, things like that, can actually help, bring in a lot more data around how your customers engage with your brand, and marrying both engagement as well as behavioral data is usually a sweet spot that can help you form a full picture of your customer segments. Second one, optimize your lead scoring to accommodate predictive analytics to create propensity models. So a lot of MarTech tools will actually help you do that, right? Create those propensity models based off of telltale signs. They pick up digital exhaust from your customers and things like that, and they will actually build a lead scoring model. So being able to apply those kind of analytics through your tools is a really good way of again forming a much more clear picture of your customers. Setting up red flags, right? This is an important one. So click-through rate is a sort of almost a classic metric that most of us use. Around 3% is about average for our industry for CTR. But if you find that in general your CTR seems to be always under that 2% mark, that's a red flag, right? That's something that tells you that something's missing, right? You're probably not segmented correctly, or you're not targeting the segments. The stories aren't resonating. There's something where there's massive drop off in CTR. And same thing for display network, right? So this is Google taking your pages, etc., and then running it through their network. Typically, this is in the 0.5% range, but if you find it much lower than that, in the 0.25 or lower range, again, that's a red flag as well. That's just one example of red flags. Obviously, there's tons of examples depending on the metrics that you use. This is another important one, right? Overlaying source data with engagement or intent data, right? So obviously, using search and social and tracking URLs and all the sort of the classic product marketing tools and digital marketing tools, but also looking at CTA performance is a good one, right? Is every presentation, every story that you tell, every touch point with your customer must have a CTA, right? And being able to track that and being able to track that back to your search and organic and social data, etc., and seeing if there's a mismatch there, or do those generally seem pretty aligned. But at the end of the day, the numbers are the numbers, right? In many cases, the MarTech stack takes a few iterations to get just right and get it humming to where you want it. And so your corporate marketing teams, your product marketing teams, your fields, as well as field marketing teams have trust in the data. But at the same time, the human element never goes away. So the idea of combining hunches with data in an iterative model, that's the key here, right? Is it's being able to have hunches, it's being able to go try things, test your hypothesis, and then quickly converge on something that works and is scalable for your marketing teams. All right, let's have some fun here. So, we talked about automated and MarTech and things like that, but I've seen some hilarious automated segmentation fails over the years, and I thought I should share that with you. So the first one is industry variations, right? So as you sort of rely on third-party data, things like that, just know that a VP at one company obviously could have vastly different sort of purchasing criteria and influence than even a director at another company. Definition variations. So if you're buying lists that have an SMB tag, SMB is probably one of the most misused sort of market segments, right? To just understand that there could be some significant variability even within that segment. Language variations, right? So how often have you seen things like principal versus principal, software engineer or marketer, or, whatever. But again, just allowing for those variations. And many marketing tools are smart enough to do that, but just know that some of these things might be happening. And of course, your classic short forms and typos, right? How many eng mangers are out there, right? That have just flourishing careers, right? But again, this is the reality we live in, right? Many market tools will pick this up, but just know that as you're buying data, or you're collecting data, even just through Salesforce or other CRM tools, there's obviously, like I said, it takes a few times to get to the point where you can actually start to trust that data. All right, let's end with a fifth C. So we did talk about the 4 C's, right? As you see at the bottom right of your screen here. But there is a fifth C, right? And this one is collaboration. This is something, again, I think could be a topic unto itself, but I'll touch upon 3 areas where we think collaboration could be a really important tool as it relates to the the way that product marketers sort of execute on a daily basis. The first one is, as we said before, think marketing contribution, not marketing attribution, right? How is marketing contributing to the overall business goals? How is it contributing to the customer experience, right? The secondary goal, it's always got to be I need to optimize my marketing spend. The second one on this list is think one consolidated marketing and sales funnel. Again, how often do we find the head of sales and the CMO just on different planets, right? And they're not speaking the same language. They're not tracking to the same pipeline even. But again, a good rule of thumb here is if you're, this year aside for obvious reasons, in a normal year, whatever the new normal is going to be, but if you find there's more than a 10% variance between your sales pipeline forecast and the actual revenue, right? That could point to a mismatch in the way that marketing and sales executes. It could point to segmentation problems, just getting it wrong in terms of where the industry is headed, and you have this sort of vast volatility between your forecasts and actuals. And like I said, anything more than 10% is a red flag. So treat that as sort of a hard number that you can go and start to drive a little bit more alignment between marketing and sales. And finally, route to market, right? As product marketers, RTM is something that we don't sort of organically think about as part of our day jobs, but thinking holistically about routes to market and actually negative targeting here could, in some cases, present opportunities to partner. Let me give you an example. If as part of your needs-based segmentation model, you realize, well, there is a certain segment of customers that is lucrative, that has pain points that our product and solutions can address. However, we're not quite set up today to be able to capitalize on that market, but we do have partners who could, and that could be a great recommendation to take back to your partners and alliances team to go and identify certain partners that could help you fulfill that. Now, as a byproduct of that, if the partner is big enough, is joint partner marketing development firms, MDFs. I love MDFs, right? Because there's skin in the game from both sides, and obviously you have access to bigger budgets. So 1 + 1 = 3. And you might be able to get account control and access to certain customers that you would not have had in the past. So what's not to like? So that's an example of being able to take segmentation data and turn that into something that is a route to market recommendation that could eventually be a significant part of your overall revenue. All right, so that's all we have time for, folks, today. Thanks for hanging on. Let's just quickly iterate what we learned, right? Segmentation is an outside-in exercise, right? At the end of the day, this needs to be based on customer needs, about where the market's headed. This is not an exercise that starts with product and thinks about what customer segments might apply to that product. Use the agile model, right? So you're not done once, right? Certainly you want to spend a lot of time. You don't want to overthink it, but you want to get something out there, and then you want to continue to iterate and look for getting as close to perfection as possible. Suboptimal segmentation with excellent execution is preferable to the reverse, right? Exactly the point we made earlier about don't get too hung up about getting it just right in the first attempt. Look for how your segmentation model sort of plays out, and then make, of course, corrections as needed. And this is a bit of a paradox, right? When you're actually a great storyteller, the way you become a great storyteller is when you're actually a good listener, right? You're able to take your customer's needs. You're able to really understand what would make a difference, what would really impact the life of the person that I'm talking to, and then build out your story based off of that. And finally, be maniacal, right? It's okay and it's good to really be maniacal about understanding your customers' needs. You gotta understand your competition probably already is, right? And if you look at some of the most successful customers today, they're just obsessed with understanding their customers. They want to know everything about how their customers deal with their product, how they evaluate competitors, what their pain points are, when they renew, why they renew. So as a product marketer, the more data you have that can help you understand your customer, the better it is. All right. You're probably wondering what's in the gift, and this is what I'll leave you with at the end. This has been, attributed to. I think it originally came from President Roosevelt, and then Raymond Richards sort of modified it to our setting here. But I think it's a powerful quote, right? Your customer doesn't care how much you know until they know how much you care, right? So again, at the end of the day, it goes back to when your customers see that you've listened to them, that you're telling them stories, and you're really appealing to their pain points. That's a good spot to be as a marketer, as a product marketer, as a storyteller. So I leave you with that, and we can now take some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Urshad, for such great talk. Just wait.
Hey, Max, can you hear me now?
Yes, Urshad, yes, I can.
Yeah, apologies.
No worries. Thank you for your presentation. Really great stuff. There's a few questions in the chat if you want to go through them.
Absolutely. First off, just a huge thank you. I see a lot of folks joining in from multiple parts of the world. It's obviously late and early, depending on where you are, and hopefully some of you are enjoying this in the on-demand version as well. So first of all, thank you, and also thank you for the engagement, both on the polls as well as the questions. I'd like to start with where we really sort of kicked it off today, right? Around what is the role of the product marketer, and we hope that this session has made a little bit of an impact in its own little way in sort of maybe restructuring how we think about product marketing as a function, right? I think all of us product marketers agree that there's a need to sort of up level what we can bring to the rest of the company, and certainly there's a positioning and a sort of classical, messaging, marketing collateral, events, all of that, right? You add in social, mobile, things like that. But really it's growing beyond that, right? It is becoming a strategic leader. It's really going back to some of the points we made earlier about adding business value and also enriching the overall customer experience end to end. And that's how we think that as product marketers, this entire function will just all grow together, right? It's a rising tide that helps all of us. So I'd love to, as Max said, we have a few questions in chat, and we'll get to those. But even before that, I'd love to see if there's been any sort of if you were to compare and contrast how you thought about product marketing at the beginning of the session and what you see as the role of the product marketer now. If there's any aspect that you would love to sort of dig into, or just made you ponder a little bit about how we can sort of up level the value of our product marketing function, just throw it in chat. We'd love to have a conversation around. Take together. There was a couple of themes that I saw emerge, and I think these are super super important, and it actually ties back into the idea that I just talked about, right? The idea of sort of product marketing being bigger than positioning, messaging, and sort of the classical functions that you would relate to product marketing. And the question is, how do you make sure you've got good quality data to base your customer segmentation off of, right? So this is fantastic, right? This is exactly the kind of thinking that we need more of in product marketing. And I take you back to, remember the 4 icons that we had in the presentation. I'll take you back to the critical thinking and the agile icons, right? I think, again, none of this is going to happen overnight. Your data quality, look, data quality is a sort of a broad swath of issues everyone deals with, right? The more data we have, by definition, the quality is going to go down, right? So even though we're all obsessed about getting all this great data, we realize that there has to be some sort of function to turn that into something that is actionable and that is trustworthy, right? So we're talking about a huge task here. We're talking about something that all of us sort of grapple with, and we're not going to, be able to impact change overnight. That said, there are a few things we can do. The number one thing I would say is go back to that critical aspect of it. Put on your Sherlock Holmes hat and think about finding telltale signs. There's always little clues that tell you that your segmentation could be off, that your route to market mix could be off, your revenue mix is at risk, right? If you've got 90% of your revenue coming in from 5% of your customers, that's another telltale sign. So there's all these sort of red flags you can set up to look at the data. And when you start to see those red flags pop up, I think I mentioned a couple of those when we talked about digital marketing, et cetera. Start to use that. And again, you don't know what you don't know, right? So those telltale signs will be specific to your vertical, to your particular situation, et cetera, right? But the key is to hire folks that have those kind of skills, who've been there, who can talk business and data, who kind of sit at that intersection. And then it's an iterative process, right? The second thing I'll say is, there's sort of in-house data, but then there's a whole slew of data exchanges that have become quite popular on the market. So think about perhaps purchasing lists and purchasing data and try to compare that data. And remember, when you purchase those lists, it's important to be able to get the data that's relevant to your industry, to your geography, right? And be able to compare that data. And again, set up red flags, right? If you find one example I gave you was the sales forecast to marketing pipeline, and if there's more than a 10% gap, that's a red flag. So things like that, where you can set up, if there's too much of a gap between how the industry defines go-to-market versus how your company is seeing it, that may be one way to do it. And again, it's not about pointing fingers, but it's about collaborating with other teams to be able to improve the quality of the data, right? That's the way that, first of all, we solve the problem. And secondly, we grow the value that product marketing brings to the rest of the company. And the last thing I'll say around that is we're seeing this idea of a chief data officer emerge across our industry, right? So if you don't have one, perhaps it's time to think about somebody who's just wakes up every day thinking about exactly this problem, right? How do I ensure that the data that our sales and marketing teams are working off of and making key strategic go-to-market decisions as well as investments, right, is reliable data, right? And so that CDO actually sits as a broker between the MarTech teams, the digital teams, the web teams, the marketing teams, as well as the sales team. So hopefully, there's some goodness in there. And I guess a related question is around the digital tools for product marketers to make effective quantitative analysis. Again, there's at least 7,000 of them, right? So clearly, this is a hot space. There's a lot of data that suggests that the CMO could perhaps be actually buying more technology than the CTO and CIO in the future. So there's something to be said for, this space. Obviously, there's a lot of different functionality that different tools can bring. Some of the tools that are, I guess, crowd favorites. HubSpot is something that offers a lot of functionality that spans product marketing as well as the demand gen aspect of marketing. So it helps the collaboration aspect. And I think there's a question in the chat about the collaboration with sales, right, as related to customer advocacy. So actually, tools like HubSpot could help in that regard. Eloqua is another one that a lot of enterprise companies use, Marketo, Mintigo for predictive analytics, things like that. And of course, Google AdWords, right? I mean, that's in many ways, so much of our data is based off of search, both organic and paid, that it's always a good place to start. And it's always a good place to be able to set up those kinds of red flags and some of the things we talked about earlier. Fantastic. Let's go back to the chat, see if there's a couple of suggestions about the changing role of the product marketer, right? So the clear delineation between personas being an outside-in exercise. Yes, so that's something that we just can't stress enough, right? And this is another point where we as product marketers can help elevate the function. Is too many of us, the folks that are developing products, engineers, etc., have our blinders on, right? Let's call a spade, and it's up to us. And I think someone mentioned this earlier as well, is to be that translator, right? To be a translator between where the market's headed, what customers need, competitive pressures, etc., and to be able to bring that in. So always be maniacal about your customers and being an outside-in exercise. And this is something where, as product marketers, I think if we get it right, it really helps downstream, right? If we compromise on personas and we start to think inside out, any number of companies that are out there, a large part of their downfall is simply because they chose to focus on what they had. And remember, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail, and you might miss market opportunities or miss large pieces of personas that really could be effective in influencing product decisions. The other comment here was definitely thought more about customer focused versus product focused. So very similar on the same lines, right? It's much more of an outside in versus inside out. So that's great to see, and happy that we've been able to make a little bit of an impact there. Another question that came in, again, I think it's a fantastic question and very relevant, is do these apply to B2B to C as well? So just to level set for our audience here, think of the B2B to C model as almost, let's say, a manufacturer, distributor, and then customer, right? So think of the Amazon model, where you've got someone who creates a product and has a brand, right? But at the same time, they're selling through someone to an end customer, right? Another example could be folks that build apps, right, for mobile, for instance. So you're building an app, but at the same time, you're selling through a marketplace to an end customer. So think, Salesforce, or let's say the Apple marketplace, etc. Right? There's obviously a number of B2B marketplaces as well. Or think about it as a service, right? You're offering a service. Instacart is a good example, right? Where you're offering a service, but you're offering it through a grocery chain, for instance, right? Especially in these times, there's a lot of elderly people, etc., that need need that service, and you're able to reach out as Instacart. You're able to reach out to your end customers directly, and you need to build a brand, but at the same time, you're offering that through a third party, right? So at least that's my understanding of B2B to C. I mean, at the end of the day, broadly speaking, I would say yes. A lot of what we talked about here does apply to B2B to C. And remember, in that model, you effectively have two sets of customers, right? So you almost need to set up personas or segments within those two sets of customers, right? So if you're an Instacart, right, you're probably working with a number of grocery chains, right? So that's one set of customers. And at the same time, you're also working with perhaps a number of different demographics within your end customers, right? So from a branding perspective, you certainly operate like a B2C company, right? As you build your value proposition, you want to build awareness around the fact that there even is a feature, such as Instacart, available to your end customers. The needs-based segmentation, actually, that's one of the reasons that it, as you look at the polls, and as we talked about in the presentation as well, is that's the beauty of the needs-based segmentation, that in this case, it actually spans both the B2B and the B2C aspects, right? So it's consistent, and it actually, going back to the why around segmentation, that's the number one why is consistency, right? Actually, looking at the poll numbers, let's talk about that for a second here. What we saw was when we first asked what's the most common? I think we needs-based. Let me actually pull it up again here. Yeah, role-based was 48%, and when we asked what offers the most accuracy, we actually saw role-based drop to 30% and actually come in at a tie with needs-based at 30%. So clearly, each of you sees the value of needs-based segmentation, right? So and there's a gap here, right? So this is another maybe a takeaway for each of us is even though we all see that needs-based is at least the most accurate tool available to us, almost half of us are find that our companies are actually using a different tool in the shed, right? So there's an opportunity for us to go back and influence that decision and close that gap, right? And this is one of the reasons is needs based is really that it's the one tool that can offer you consistency regardless of what situation you're dealing with, both in B2B as well as B2B2C. And the final thing I'll say about that is when you're thinking about routes to market, you're definitely thinking of sort of a reseller model for B2B2C, right? So again, as a product marketer, always think about how we can add more value in terms of decisions that typically wouldn't be a product marketer's purview, but insert yourself in those decisions, right? Insert yourself in those conversations around business strategy and add value. And slowly you'll find that you'll build this culture, right? Each of us represents product marketing as a function. We're ambassadors. And the more we can do to elevate what we bring to those discussions, we're helping each other out, right? And I think we're helping the business, and we have the luxury of sitting in the cockpit. I've always said this, right? Of the company. We see sales, we see the outside in aspects, we see how the product is made. We get to influence a lot of sort of go-to-market decisions. So let's really live up to the luxury that we've been afforded by the company. So awesome. I think those are the questions we have. And again, thank you for the chat and the engagement here. Really appreciate it. And I think with that, I'll hand it back to you, Max.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ershad. And with that, we'll finish up. Thanks once again, everyone, for tuning in, and thanks for a great presentation.
Thanks, everyone.
Speak to you soon, Ershad. See you soon.
Bye-bye.